Right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine, and Coavera, formerly Pipeliner CRM. Joining you as usual from a bright and sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Lee Benson, who's just down the road in Phoenix, Arizona. How you doing, Lee?
I'm doing really well. Good to be here, John.
Down the road and 8 hours later. Lee, you're a serial entrepreneur, leadership coach, Wall Street Journal best-selling author, over 30 years experience in founding and scaling companies. You have built and led 8 businesses, most notably growing Able Aerospace from just 2 employees to a 500-person team. Um, you're the founder and CEO of Execute to Win. You help organizations accelerate value creation through mind management system. And you're the author of Your Most Important Number, co-author of Value Creation Kit and Value Creation Family. And what we're going to talk about today is why value creation beats growth at all costs. Um, Lee, we're coming off the back of a period of where everything was about hyper growth, growth at all costs. Forget about the bottom line. Forget about anything else. Just growth. You just got to post top line numbers. Um, so when you want to focus on value and you want to do it properly, you kind of have to go against this little bit of this prevailing wisdom. Now it has abated a little bit because of economic circumstances, but how do you get people to switch from the hyper growth to the value creation mindset?
Yeah, for me, just thinking about what is creating value, what does that look
Mhm,
like? And I like to do it holistically. So there's material value, it's growth in revenue, it's cash
mhm.
flow, it's all of that stuff. Super important. But there's also a positive emotional energy, which is another bucket. I think that's the scarcest commodity on the planet. I think it's the
Mhm.
X factor for leaders because we create the environment that should energize everyone to create more and more value. And then the third category, I call it spiritual value creation, but it's really connectedness. So what are we doing
Right.
to strengthen teams and all of it? So I think about creating value in balance in all three things. I do it in my family life. I've done it in all 8 companies that I've
Mhm.
started from scratch now. And as a result of that, we've actually grown significantly faster than our competition in every one of those different markets, focusing on value creation. And in your point about growth, I think to be healthy, we have to grow. I mean, the
Sure.
companies don't just stagnate. They either they're going up or they're going backwards. So we have to grow. The value creation focus really allows a company to do that in the right way. And I'm always thinking long term. This is about consistent year over year growth at a percentage rate that's exceptional for your industry, and they're all different. And it works. And I guess the other thing I would say about it just feels a lot better to work in a company that's focused that way than it's all about the money and nothing else.
Well, yeah, and absolutely, because it tends to kind of make people feel a bit devalued in what they're doing if they're not, because in hyper growth focused companies, let's face it, it's all on the sales, isn't it? Like they're the heroes, everything is there. The people who are enabling all of it kind of get a little bit forgotten in the mix, and they have to often deal with the chaos. So what was it? Tell me, how did you operationalize this? Say when you took like the aerospace company from 2 to 500 employees, how do
Mm.
you operationalize that concept of growth with value creation, growth through value creation?
Yeah, the sales side, when I look at the whole value creation flow in a business, and let's talk about Able Aerospace.
Mhm.
There's awareness. How do people even find out about us? How do we get marketing qualified leads, sales qualified, close them? The design of the products and services, the delivery of those things, the ongoing customer experience. And I look at every organization that way. And are you red, green, or yellow on each one of those links in the chain, if you will, of this value creation flow structure, which is a lot more productive, in my view, in terms of how to look at an organization than a typical hierarchy
Sure.
structure. So it's this value creation flow structure. So going through, we have to optimize it with the business model and everything. But how we actually show up as leaders to cause that to happen is the most important thing.
Mhm.
You have goals. Every company likely has those. There are systems that cause value to be created. That's incredibly important. But the most important thing are how the leaders are implementing the systems to cause the goals to happen and setting the right goals and everything else. So that second category of emotional energy, This is something I really doubled down on with the leaders to make sure that they understood that, self-awareness incredibly
Mhm.
important, how people consistently experience them. And interestingly, in the 23 years going from counting myself, 3 people to about 540 when I sold the
Mhm.
business, never once did we have a leader quit, ever. Had to ask a few to leave, that it wasn't quite right anymore.
Mhm.
That says a lot, and never an employee lawsuit, never an EOC claim, nothing ever.
Mhm.
Never heard of another company that accomplished that. And then on the connectedness side, so operationalizing emotional energy is really about leadership development, but in a practical way that connects it to actually creating value. And I can dig into the 3 sort of
Mhm.
categories and how we went there. Now, on the connectedness side, or what I'm calling spiritual value creation, all of these different programs to connect employees. And I could go through a lot of those and we could spend an hour talking about it. We don't have it today, but let
Mhm.
me pick one.
Yeah.
I put in a 10,000 square foot gym, told the employees train 2 days a week for an entire month. We'll pay 100% of your health insurance premium the following month. If not, you pay 20%. We pay 80. It's still a good deal.
Mhm.
Oh, and if you ever bring your family members in, we'll give you even more money in your paycheck.
Right.
So they couldn't use the equipment on their own. They had to take classes with functional movement certified trainers,
Right.
and it strengthened relationships. They were more productive, they were more collaborative. And out of, the roughly 540 when I sold it, there were close to 400 qualifying for this program. It was incredible. Just like
Mhm.
all the benefits of doing something like that. And so
Yeah, and just on that, Lee, because I just want to underline that because I think that's a very important point because a lot of times people miss that mind-body connection and they miss there's a physical element to everything too, and you can't divorce like just the intellectual from the physical, and it all works together. And what you were doing there, what you did there, is a great example of actually, operationalizing that and helping people because it's not something that comes naturally to most people.
it doesn't, but what does come natural to most people is what it feels like to go through life, and they know when it feels good. So
Yeah.
creating an environment where it feels really good and we get a whole lot more productive engagement of everyone, including the CEO, when we have that kind of environment that we're in. And so what's the net result of 23 years? And I couldn't articulate it early on. I sort of evolved into
Mhm.
this. But over 23 years, the 15 years prior to selling in 2016, we had consistent, a little bit better on average, 20% compounded annual growth.
Wow.
And when we sold the company in the aviation aftermarket space, where you repair and overhaul aircraft components, assemblies, even entire aircraft, in the end, helicopters, if you got a 7 or 8x multiple of EBITDA, you did really well. We got
Mhm.
a 21.6x multiple of EBITDA because of how consistently we grew, the 100% believable story about how it can grow into the future, and an amazing strategic buyer that could leverage it, 4 to 5 fold what I could see if had we not sold it. And by the way, keeping that company would have been an equally good option, if not better than selling it, and I wasn't even looking to sell. For me, it
Right.
was about the long term. They approached us, walked away from
Mhm.
the deal 3 times before we finally said yes.
Yeah. But what you said there about though is consistency, predictability, and I would say probably a more calm approach because when somebody's doing an M&A, right, and they're looking at businesses, the financials are one thing, but then also like how the company operates, the people, all of that. If it's a chaotic kind of mess, but they're doing well, they're hyper growing, but they're not, it's a more difficult acquisition.
100%. So the point you're touching on, and in preparation for this conversation, I listened to a number of your podcasts, and I love the one on authenticity where Kelly
Mhm.
was talking about wedding dresses and all that.
Yeah.
Are you trying to be seen a certain way, or are you trying to be a certain way?
Mm,
And I think the majority are trying to position to be seen a certain way to
yeah.
either get a price for their business or get customers to work with them. But when you're truly authentic and you're building trusted relationships that are turning you on to their trusted relationships, that's everything, and that's what we were as a company. For example, I'm sure in San Diego you probably have this too, but in Phoenix, there's the best company to work for,
Yeah. Yeah.
environment in Phoenix, and everybody's vying for that.
Mhm.
Is like, in my view, it was all a competition for second place, and if you sponsored their event, you probably had a better chance of
Yep.
winning. And we
Mhm.
had first place, like we had the place. We didn't need to go out there and advertise it to the
Mhm.
world. Our employees were telling the world, "You need to work here." There's a big difference, right?
Oh, there's a massive difference, and I think that's a really that's a really key point though about how you show up and how you portray yourself and everything, and as you said, that's the authenticity, and I think part of it um, is being intentional or deliberate about the culture of your company, right? Because a lot of people just allow culture to develop organically, and it just tends to be a reflection of the personality of the founder,
Yeah.
and that can be positive, that can be negative, that can be somewhere in between. But I think particularly as you grow, you have to really, define what your culture is. Like I said, otherwise you're kind of outsourcing it to fate.
Yeah, in Naval Aerospace, we were incredibly intentional about our culture.
Mhm,
It was so important to the point where, to me, a simple definition of culture is what we agree to do and how things get done. Like what we
mhm,
agree to do every day is create value for our customers. We do it this way. If we don't do it, our jobs are in jeopardy.
mhm,
And all the behaviors around how we interact with each other to create that value. And ultimately, I'm always trying to connect culture fully and intentionally to creating value. That's it. That's what we're trying to do. And at the aerospace company, so imagine 500 plus team members, frontline technicians, parts washers, engineers, like the whole spectrum. Every one of them, every 6 months, and they would kind of dot them in every week or two.
mhm,
For every one of our alignment tools that drove our intentional culture, our mission, our vision, our behaviors, quality policy, they had to have one example of where they applied it to increase the value of the business, customer experience or profitability, internal, external.
mm.
And so everybody was living it. That's an example of operationalizing it. And a lot of
Yeah.
companies don't think they should have to do stuff like that. But if it's wallpaper, it's just wallpaper. And then your culture is completely unintentional.
Yeah, yeah, no, and absolutely, and like I would say, like the bumper stickers, it's no point putting your values and or principles or whatever on your website if all they are is sitting on your website. Um, and so and part of it too, I think, is down to focus, right? Because that's another part. Like oftentimes, people have celebrated like chaos and like just running everywhere and chasing after everything and high energy but really focusing and understanding who you're really creating value for is critical too. And you've started a load of businesses, so you would know better than most how critical it is to be to focus in on who your real customer is as opposed to sort of grabbing everybody.
100%. One of the internal mantras that I live by for each business is do less better.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter what we think the world wants, we have to confirm it. And I've heard you talk about these concepts, but
Mhm.
how do we package and test very effectively? How do we come up with the right questions so we're not developing a whole bunch of answers, really good answers to the wrong questions? But understanding the customer and continually improving that experience for them is everything. And an interesting story around this, when I was building the aerospace business, I got a LinkedIn connection request, and it was somebody working for a very large, probably 20 times larger than we were as a business,
Mhm.
company that had been that one of our competitors. And he said, "I've gone out of my way to figure out how to compete with you, and I can't touch you. Can I
Mhm.
please get a job with you?" And he was hired as a VP in this company
Mhm.
solely to compete with us and
Right.
a few others, but he said primarily us. And he said, I've been let go. I wasn't effective. Can I come sweep floors for you to learn what you're doing?" And I said, "Well, you don't need to do that. All we ever focused on is the customer and improving their experience, which includes improving their business model, everything that goes into it. You focused on the competition, so
Mm.
you never had a chance ever."
Yeah, and that I just want to underline again because that's such a profound point as well. Is like focusing on the competition rather than focusing on on your customer and how you can bring additional value, how you can make sure that your customer has the greatest experience possible. I think that's such a good point to raise because yeah, sometimes we get very fixated on what the competition are doing and we lose sight of what we're doing ourselves.
Well, and it's terrible to me the way larger companies compete. They will try to block you through
Hmm.
rewriting regulations, legally, any other way than, "Hey, let's just have the best value creator
Yeah.
win in the eyes of the customers."
Mhm.
That's and so we'd have to play that game. I can't just sit here and be a victim and go, "I can't believe this
Sure.
is going." It's the
Yeah.
way the unfortunate world works when it comes to a lot of larger companies. They just don't have great integrity or ethics, I would say. So you kind of have to do the blocking and tackling why we're 100% focused on the customers, and that's a whole other 2-hour podcast as well.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your mind approach. What is that?
Yeah, trying to make things more simple so you and I can have this conversation. Oh, culture is this, be
Yeah.
intentional. Oh, business model, on all the you can make something that's complex impossible. And I think the job that we have as leaders is to make the complex simple. And
Yeah.
then we make it simple, simplify that even more. So I want to look at a company with, just take this one example with 500 plus team members. I wanna be able to when I look at any part of the business, I wanna see how they're creating value. Are they on track or not? I wanna know what they're talking about. I wanna know what actions they're taking. I wanna know what they have to leverage to create more value, and I wanna know that in seconds.
Hmm.
And I wanna see it everywhere. So, with the mind management system, every team has a most important number that reflects the value they were designed to create. The company has one too. It's how
Right.
whatever you would use to value the business, but every single team does. And then what drives it, what are the things they can leverage that will drive that value creation? And so I could just see on a dashboard red, green, or yellow for every single team, and I knew where I needed to look. And if they pick the right number, and that's a bit of an art, if it improves, it accretes up and improves all the way to
Mhm.
the top, and increasing the value of the business. So I could see that in seconds. And for any leader with your organization out there, how easy is it to get that information? And most can't get it. They spend a lot of time getting the lay of the land. I spend 0 time getting the lay of the land. 0.
And on your point there is, and I think this is a trap a lot of people fall into. It's like you can measure pretty much everything if you really want, and you can create data and your reports and KPIs and everything. But at the end of the day, it's really about which are the ones that are most important. Because a lot of times I see people spending too much time and energy on metrics that are nice to have. They're interesting vaguely, but they're not the real levers of the business. And I think it's also it dilutes focus then if you're always looking at too many metrics.
Well, I think 100%. And there's really only 2 categories of metrics in my view. There's your team's most important number that's most
Mhm,
reflective of the value you should be creating, and it should drive the majority of the right behaviors. You can knock it out of the park with a number, but it doesn't help anything.
mhm,
And then the second set of indicators, usually typically a lot of, or a few of the right leading indicators, only being measured to help you make better decisions to improve the value your team creates. That's
mhm.
it. If you can't defend that, if it's, oh, that's just what we've always measured, is what we do. Okay, let's start over again. Not going to work, to your point.
Yeah, because I think we've, because technology and everything, I think, we've been spoiled for choice. So we've got, I mean, I remember back to you talking about simple numbers that matter. I ran a business unit many years ago, and our measurement, I had these three thermometers outside on the wall outside my office, like with magnet ones, right? One was the month, one was the quarter, and one was the year. And every day, I just come up and I change the magnet to where they were on the thing. Everybody knew. Nobody. We never needed to talk about it. It was there.
And that's it. And then what's a measure that matters to all of the team members?
Mhm.
We want them to be there and have fun and
Yeah.
energize and run through walls to create value, but they're also there to earn money. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I did at the aerospace business is we'd have boards everywhere with measures that mattered to those
Mhm.
groups,
Yeah.
but also measures that mattered to everybody. And there was a thermometer on one side that would have it was the PC percentage, performance comp percentage. So
Mhm.
I actually took we took a percentage of our total pre-tax net profit and paid it out proportionate to income. So payroll, for round number sakes, $1 million, and there's $100,000 in bonus. It doesn't matter what you made, you got a 10%
Mhm.
bonus. But throughout the month, they could see that PC percentage climbing. I think the highest month I remember was about 31, point something percent.
Yeah.
And every single frontline team member got that as a bonus on top of all the money they made the previous month. And I mean, there's other rules around, but it was
Mhm.
kind of cool because it incentivized everyone to help everybody else earn another dollar for the company because they
Mhm.
got a big percentage of it. And it was amazing, and it was open book management.
Mhm.
Everybody could see all the numbers. If you didn't understand debit and credit and accrual and, inventory adjustments, we would give you a plain English detailed trial balance for your department so you could
There
see
you
what it
go.
was and what you spent. they were all in the game, and it didn't even matter, like, you start, you're a $10 an hour employee, you've never done anything before, it's your first job, here's your financials, and then
That's brilliant.
start them in the education process, and a lot of CEOs later, "Well, why are you doing that? They don't understand it." What Well, how long should we wait to be trained? If we can't show them the bullseye, what we're
Mhm.
trying to hit, how are they gonna make better and better decisions to be able to actually hit it? So I love that whole open, transparent, we're all together, it's a value creation machine, and we are doing this together, and some really rise through that process, others don't, and a few will fall out the bottom, but I think in that environment, 7 or 8 out of 10 that you typically would have to let go will,
Yeah.
be solid middle performers.
No,
Because
absolutely. I mean, I did something at a company. I was running some companies for a parent company a number of years back, and and I was compensated on EBITDA, right?
yeah.
And so I was looking at the organization. I was thinking, yeah, we've got the salespeople, they've got their commissions, they've got their bonuses, they've got all their incentives. And I was looking at the rest. I think the people who deliver, who do all the implementation, who do all of that. And I'm thinking, okay, well, they have no real incentives beyond their salary, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things I wanted to get was more profitable business. So I put in a bonus structure for the delivery people that if they could keep costs down on implementation and delivery, then and the more the operating profit increased, they would get a percentage of that. So it ended up then people who were disempowered before were now going to salespeople and asking them the profitability of the deals they were doing, and they're asking them, why are you including this? Why are you including that? That's adding expense. Why are you shipping overnight? Why didn't you order this 3 days? It was fantastic, and it was done in such a great way that it ended up being a great collaborative experience. Like the sales people thought it was hilarious now that project managers or implementation assistants were coming to them, checking the gross profit of their business.
That's exactly the environment that we created. It was incredible, and even with the sales folks, they didn't have their individual plans. They were in the same PC program, and the
Mhm.
only difference was if you were a leader in global business, because we were in every region of the
Yeah.
world, you got a kicker. So if 1x was 30%, you might have got a 2x. So you got
Mhm.
60%. So everybody's incentivized to knock it out of the park. The only potential downside is you could have somebody just riding everybody else's coattails and not doing anything. You just have to watch for that and get rid of it. That's a way easier problem to deal with than 30 different incentive programs and everybody's upset all the time. I didn't like that at all. And I did try that, just not
Yeah.
be better in the early days.
Yeah, yeah, but it is amazing. It is amazing how often companies overlook. They just think, well, I don't need to incent or I don't need to incent behavior over here because these are just salary people just doing their job and blah blah blah. And instead of what you're talking about, and what I did back there is like getting everybody feeling like they're not just skin in the game, but they can optimize the outcome.
100%. I've always viewed every team member I've ever hired, they can do what I've done for sure. Some of them are on track to do it in half the time it took
Mhm,
me to do it, and others on track to do it in 300 years, but they're all moving in a direction, and I think our job is to develop them to go in that direction, and I see them as pure potential.
mhm,
And I think leaders will do themselves a huge favor by showing up that way with their team. It's just like adults in the school systems. I spent a lot of time with families and kids, and K-12 education is really important to me, and we're making a lot of mistakes here. So I've started another company called dinnertable.com, and it's about helping parents raise kids that will create value in the world. But going through all that, most adults are talking at kids, down to kids, over their heads. Very few show up with their potential,
mm.
and they remember that, and it's a really big deal because in my entire life, there's only 2 people that showed up that way with me. There's a lot of capable leaders, thousands I've worked with, but only 2. One was a guy named Jim in a restaurant when I was, 16, locally at a Coco's restaurant,
Mhm.
and he showed up that way for me, and I'll never forget it, ever. And then the only other one was Jack Welch, who was my business partner before he passed away, a few years ago. So why aren't more leaders doing that? It's a big deal. What's your thought on that, John? I think this is so important.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a lack of in many ways. I think it's very constrained thinking, to be honest. And I think people, a lot of leaders allow themselves to start to, once you're in that position, they allow themselves to get detached rather than to be intentional about staying very attached. And what you're doing, what you're talking about there, I mean, what you did with these people coming in and even giving them their own like little, financial spreadsheets and stuff like that, that is that is such a great investment in people. That if I'm coming into the company, I'm going to be wow. I mean, you're taking time and you're trusting me. Even maybe I perceive my job as being not that important, but now you're going here. Here's your numbers. Here's what you need to do. And teaching you how to do it. That makes you feel like you're an important part and an important element in the company, as opposed to, yeah, I'm just over here in one of these departments. I'm a junior. I'll probably stay a year, maybe.
Yeah. And there's a bigger thing going on, limiting beliefs
Yeah.
about anybody that says this is what I can accomplish, even if it's something big, is by definition a limiting belief.
Hmm.
And so they all come in with that, and they've been trained to think that way. And I bring them and say, "You're saying you can't, you never would, and it's too scary, whatever. Of course you can. It's just, do you want to take a step in that direction?"
Yeah, and I think on that, Lee, I think that's I've come over the years to believe like fear of failure is obviously a very strong thing, but fear of success, I actually think, is can often be a stronger inhibitor to people, because they may think they want something, but then they get very scared about, well, how's that going to change? Maybe I'm going to be a manager now, not just a team member. How is that dynamic going to work? Maybe I don't want all that extra. Now I'm going to have to work harder. Maybe I have to travel more, and they talk themselves out of opportunities. And I think that's where we need to encourage also people to not be afraid of taking those steps forward.
Yeah. Yeah, being uncomfortable and being comfortable with that
Mhm.
is one of the most important life skills to develop. So, yeah, I've never been a manager, I'm gonna be a manager. The
Mhm.
safety harness is off, that's gonna be too scary, I don't wanna do it. I think all the opportunity in the world is in the struggle. It all
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And you have to put some effort into that. Nobody develops without effort, micro to macro, and I it's another way of talking about struggle. And I got my start, and I this is 100% right. Came from a really kind of strange family environment, but at 6 years old, a neighbor that I didn't know said, "Pull weeds for 25 cents an hour," asked me, and I said, "Of course." And back then in the '60s, that was a lot of money
Yeah.
for a six-year-old. But struggled to develop that capability, used it to create value, build confidence, and I kept taking bigger and bigger steps, and that's all I've done my entire life. So the harder it is, if I'm doing something worthwhile and it makes sense directionally in terms of the value that I wanna create, I start to feel really good about, like, I've been through this so many times now, I know I'm gonna come out the other side. So I think for a lot of the listeners, you have to do it a few times and come out the other side, with a win to go, "Wait a minute, this works if I'm applying the right work, hard, smart work." Doesn't mean everything you should keep going on. You could reach a
Yeah.
point where it doesn't make sense, but learn to trust the struggle and go through it a few cycles.
Yeah, I know, absolutely, and and also remember, your greatest lessons are going to maybe be learned at times when it doesn't feel very good. Your greatest teachers may not be the people you think they are, and they may actually later on be the person who caused you the most struggle, but allowed you to learn the most about yourself.
Yeah, even in unhealthy struggles, there's value to be gleaned and applied in the, coming years or whatever time frame to create even more value for yourself and others.
Absolutely.
100%. Healthy struggles, unhealthy struggles. Try for more intentionally designed struggles that get you there even faster.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, listen, Lee, this has been great. All of Lee's information will be below this video. But before we go, please do remind people about what you do.
Oh, thank you. If you want to learn more about what we do, please go to etw.com or dinnertable.com. At ETW, it's all about leadership development. There's CEO mastermind groups. We have a leadership community called Leadership Value Lab, and so much more, and a lot of free resources. So please go there on the dinnertable.com website. It's all about helping families raise kids to create value in the world and intentionally create value as a family and grow it generationally. It's such a cool movement. We have over 40,000 parents in 2 years in our
Yeah.
community, want to take it to millions. This is what's going to make a difference in the world, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I encourage you to check them out. As I said, they'll be below this video. So thanks again, Lee. Thank you for watching and listening. See you all again very soon. Thank you.